Hello everyone and welcome to Saturn Returns with me, Caggie Dunlop. This is a podcast that aims to bring clarity during transitional times where there can be confusion and doubt. Today I'm joined by Francesca Oddie, who is an astrologer from London, and in this episode we dive into the importance of the big three, your Saturn return, which is especially important right now because if you were born between March the 7th, 1994 and March 24, 1996, you will have just gone into your Saturn return as Saturn moves into Pisces. So this episode is going to be particularly important for you. We also touch on the importance of nodes. Now, this is something that I have been working on as we've been doing our courses for Saturn returns and how your nodes help in discovering your purpose. We touch on numerology, which is something that I can't, if I'm honest, really get my head around, but Francesca explains it and she speaks about this very well. We also touch a little bit on astrocartology. So this is really for the astrology, esoteric lovers out there to start this season on. I hope you enjoy. Francesca, welcome to the Saturn Returns podcast. You are my first guest that is in my home where we have created a little chat show for Saturn Returns. So welcome.
This is cool. Thank you for having me. For my tea.
How are you doing?
I honestly
be honest. This podcast is all about honesty.
I woke up at 3, had a really weird night, so I'm a little bit dazed.
Okay, we'll go easy today.
Yeah, but it could be it's kind of hallucinating. Be extra honest. Like, oh god,
yeah, sometimes
no filter.
That's good. And for the audience that doesn't know, would you be able to explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I am an astrologer primarily. Then I got into numerology and I did a little bit of tarot and Reiki and herbal medicine and all the stuff, but I overwhelmed myself with my Gemini placements and I'm an astrologer. So I teach astrology and do consultations and obsess and think in charts and interrogate people.
I love that, interrogate people. How did you find your way into astrology?
I was always into it, like a lot of people who were, I was as a child and then at school a little bit more. And at uni, I had a boyfriend who bought me because I went out with 2 guys at uni and they both...
At the same time?
Succession, first year uni, how it is.
I'm here for it.
Gemini placements.
Makes sense.
Another story. But yeah, anyway, so I saw this pattern and I started to see patterns a lot and was going on about astrology, and he bought me a book. And then eventually I lived in Italy, and the Italians generally know their rising sign. They just know it more than we know it in the UK. Like guys will say, but what's your other sign? So I started to be able to work out people's rising signs, and I was just obsessed, Googling. But it never occurred to me to be an astrologer, ever, in a million years. I didn't know it was a job. I didn't know it was a thing. It was just like Mystic Meg, and that was it. And eventually I was at a networking event for property, and I met a psychic who was combining interior design. She'd got an interior design qualification with being a clairvoyant, and she'd like come in and do your colours and do your home. And we got chatting at the networking event, like Thursday night. I had a glass of wine, like, oof, quite tired actually. And then she blew my mind, told me my whole life. And then we went to get our coats. And I was like, when's your birthday? Were you born at 8 p.m? She's like, yeah, how do you know what time I was born? And I'm like, psychicking the psychic. And it's because she's a Taurus and I have a thing for Taurus, sunset Tauruses, which you are really.
Which I am, yeah.
But more the rising Scorpio, she's rising Scorpio. And I just felt that. And then she said, you're going to be an astrologer, you've done it in all your past lives, and you're going to write books, but not till you're about 40. And I was like, what? How are you doing this? And she was talking to my spirit guides, which I was like, why are they here?
So what were you doing before that in terms of your career?
Insurance,
wow.
Fan biz.
Because I often think that people that I meet that are astrologers or into this kind of thing, like people get it as if it's relearning a language that they already knew at some point. And personally for me, I love it, but I cannot quite grasp it to that degree that Nora, who does a lot of the astrology for Saturn Returns, and other people I've met. So I'm always really fascinated by people that find it, and it is like rediscovering something they already knew, which it sounds like it was for you.
I'd been searching for it my whole life, big time. Like with my degree, with everything, I'd really been looking for my career. I really wanted to work. I've got a freakishly, I always say this, but then anyway, I've got a really good memory for dates, and so my friends always used to test me and be like, "What happened on the 10th of March, 2000?" And I'd be like, and remember. And they'd be like, what are you going to do with this memory? Everyone was always saying, what are you going to do with this memory of yours? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I really didn't know. And I was sad about it because I wanted to be good. You know, in your 20s, everyone's getting jobs. What did you do?
What did I do before this?
Yeah.
I was in music. Before that, I was in TV. I mean, my 20s were filled with chopping and changing careers. I started a fashion line when I was like 25. And by the end of my 20s, I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was really when I went through my Saturn Return that I was like, this is interesting. This is a wild ride. And then just started talking about my own experience. And then strangely, that became my thing.
Makes sense with all the Neptune and all the Pisces.
Well, yeah, I want to get into that because before we started recording, I was having to resist, especially with where I'm feeling at the moment. I'm like, don't turn this into your own therapy session, but also tell me everything. But before we get into that, because there's two things that you've said that I want to explore. One on a more personal level, but you just touched on the importance of the rising sign and how when you were in Italy, that was something that people would ask you, because there's a history in that, isn't there? Because it was mainly the one that people would look to before the sun sign, and then didn't it shift when it kind of became more popular or being put into like newspapers and stuff like that?
I don't know, actually, honestly.
Yeah,
I've heard that people say things, but I haven't researched that, but I don't know why the Italians all know their rising sign. I don't know.
Well, for people that don't know that much about astrology, would you be able to explain the kind of importance of, I guess, the big three?
The big three, so that would be your sun, moon, and rising, are the parts of your character that are really clearly like, whoa, obvious. And your sun is your identity. It's your masculine archetype, if you want to go with that. As in, it's, you know, the active, what you want to put out into the world, what you want to create, what you want to make, what you want to do. Whereas your moon sign would be more how you want to live, how you love, how you want to nourish yourself, how you eat, your diet, your body, your physicality. And then the two meet and are expressed through the rising sign. And the rising sign is how we interact with the world. It's that interface.
How we move through the world.
Yeah. And how do we go into new situations? How do we speak, interact?
Because a lot of people will message me, or I think that are interested in astrology, and they just perhaps say they don't resonate with their sun sign. And I think that's always a good place. You know, obviously it can go into so much more depth, but to start with, because it makes up a bit more of the tapestry of a person's personality, and also how we're supposed to operate and move through the world, that helps us kind of know how to navigate certain things.
Yeah.
So within that, I mean, before we started recording, you clearly knew that I was a Pisces moon, or it was obvious, but why was it obvious?
Well, initially I just felt quite relaxed about coming here. Obviously I've been emailing Sydney, and it was 11 a.m. start, but I could feel it wasn't a hard 11. And I was in my Uber and I was 5 minutes late, and I was like, she's definitely not going to care.
Nothing's a hard start with me.
Because some people say 11 and you feel like, I've got to get there. And I was like, she means 11-ish. And then when I got here, you're like, oh, I've had tech issues. And I was like, yeah, I could feel this wasn't going to be stressy.
You know, makes me think this girl I met recently, she said to me, she was like, you're like Jessa from Girls. I was like, why? And she was like, when she turns up at a dinner party at like 11 p.m. and the girl was like, I asked you to come for 8. She was like, I thought it was a suggestion. And I am a bit like that. Everything's got a lot of leeway.
Yeah, a lot of Neptune. Like I did a podcast yesterday with a girl born March 89. And I kept saying Neptune. She's like, what are you on about? But it makes sense. You do dance and film and fashion and broadcasting and spirituality, but you move in that Pisces Neptunian
realm,
free flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes to my detriment, I would say. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why my Saturn return was so
savage.
It was pretty savage. And I kind of want to get into that next because obviously the podcast is centered around Saturn return and based really off my own experience. But then now we're moving into time where people that are about to go through their Saturn return that are in Pisces, right? And so I would love to kind of explore the differences between, let's say, me who went through it a fair few years ago now, which is kind of crazy, in the sign of Capricorn. And then like how does that manifest differently for people?
Yeah. And also, so my Uber driver here had Saturn in Sag, conjunct Uranus.
Right.
And Uranus is a planet that rules Aquarius. And I was just getting Aquarius vibes from him. And I was just listening.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
When you meet people, what sign they are?
Saturn, yeah. I can now, but only in the past 2-3 years probably. So when you asked me about the big three, initially I'd be like, I can see your sun sign. I can see your rising sign. And I can see your moon. And then I stopped being able to see Mars and Venus. Now I can see Saturn. And I really feel that Saturn is who we are deep down. Saturn is bones. It's the structure of our life. All these things, but I'll say it anyway. And when we mature, we do become that. We become that Saturn. And this guy he had so many opinions. I didn't speak. He just lectured me on everything. And I loved it. He was so interesting, but he was very free thinker. He loved being an Uber driver because he hated being employed. He's like, I take lunch when I want. I go on holiday when I want. I was like, hey, I hear you. And he had all these opinions on politics and health and he just had opinions, and he was so into freedom. And I could hear that. And with you guys, particularly the 1989 ones, so you've got Saturn in Capricorn, but you've also got Neptune in Capricorn, really, really close to Saturn. And the Berlin Wall came down around when you were born. And if Saturn is walls were dissolved the year you were born. And I've got a lot of good friends born your age. And one of my good friends, I was always like, why are you so Pisces? She wasn't. She's a Gemini and she's got Saturn in Capricorn and the moon in Taurus. I'm like, why are you like this? Why are you so kind of relaxed in your own land, kind of wearing odd socks? Like, why are you a Pisces? And a lot of them you guys are into dance. You're all very free flowing, dreamy types. And I think it's because the Neptune's there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really part of your guys' flavor, that you are really spiritual beings. You live in an abstract world where you feel things and you're sensitive and you live and particularly with your North Node and your moon in Pisces, because I just looked, you're full on fish.
I have North Node and I do. No, I do. You're right. I do. Which brings me to another point. But before I kind of divert
you have to hold
that,
me in.
Yeah, I have to hold myself into. So the 1989, because of that Neptune, because I also resonate probably the most with my Pisces moon, and I always gravitate towards Pisces as well. I just, that's kind of, but that's my internal world as well. But you're saying that also because of
the Neptune.
And
that's just recently, last year as well, working with people who were your age and being like, why are they all so Pisces? And it's interesting that the Uber driver here also had a really tight conjunction between Saturn and Uranus. And all I got from him was the Aquarius, because Uranus rules Aquarius. And it's a nice synchronicity that then you've got Saturn and Neptune. And this is really something I'm thinking about at the minute. And that's why everybody's Saturn return is unique. But the 1988 have a very strong freedom, science, liberation, rebellion energy. And the 1989 are very deeply sensitive, mystical, spiritual, feel. You feel a lot.
In their feels. And what about those that are about to go into their Saturn return with Saturn in Pisces?
They were the people who started coming for readings when they were about 24. And I remember being like, you lot are advanced. They all had their tarot cards. They all knew a lot. Because my generation, Saturn and Sag, your generation, we were all like, what's a Saturn return? We get to 30 and we discover this thing and we're like, oh. Whereas the Saturn and Pisces lot have known.
Yeah, they're ready.
They're really ready, yeah. Some of them are. I imagine it'll be 50-50 like with all Saturn returns. And the ones with some of them will just be diving into this spiritual career. But I think we are, again, my taxi driver, synchronicity, he was really like, he was brushing his teeth with an olive branch. I told you, didn't I?
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, yeah, you get olives and we scratch our teeth. I was like, I don't use any chemicals. That's what we all do. It's great. In my country, 95% of people don't get cancer, don't get heart disease, don't get diabetes. We're all healthy. He's like, it's all money and everything's corrupted here. It's like, I want the world to get back to natural ways. I really want the world to understand that it's not about money. And I was literally doing this on a podcast yesterday, ranting, saying exactly the same thing. And I think that this Saturn in Pisces shift for the collective will be moving to natural medicine, and part of what's happening with the collapse of health services at the minute and the pressure on the health service is that we need alternative medicine as well, because of course we need the NHS for emergency medicine and operations and all the things that we need hospitals for, but a lot of time is taken up with things that can be treated alternatively, and I think the Saturn in Pisces lot have that skill set and will be practicing herbalists, homeopaths, psychotherapists, craniosacral therapists. I think we'll be understanding how when we are spiritually sick, we become physically sick. Part of my Saturn return was a bad shoulder. I was having steroid injections in my shoulder because I was in pain, and I read this amazing book by Dr. John Sarno called Healing Back Pain, The Mind-Body Connection, and thousands of people, I've given it to 4 people, all who have said this book's incredible, changed my life, symptoms gone. And the idea is that all our emotional pain goes to a point in the body because we are more able to deal with physical pain than emotional pain.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't expect this conversation to go in this direction, but now that it is, but now that it is, let's free flow with it, because it's at the same time I understand what you're saying, but I was looking at something yesterday and it was about how many people are on Adderall,
which is,
I think in the last 4 years or like 5 years, it's kind of gone from 2019 sort of 9 million, or I could be getting this quite wrong, but now in 2023 it's at 40 million.
And what's it for?
It's for concentration and focus. So Adderall is taken for ADHD. And I mean, that's just one example of many in terms of the way that in the Western culture, we still apply this pill for every ill mentality. And you go to the doctor and you're like, oh, I'm struggling with this. And they rarely actually look holistically at the whole body, the emotional state and stuff like that. So I do feel like we are due a shift. And we can also see in recent years how much, I think that kind of mentality has gone against us really
But we've all been there, I think. And like I said this on the pod yesterday, it's awkward to talk about because we're saying with antidepressants, 17% of the UK are on antidepressants, and they're not depressed because they've got an antidepressant deficiency. There is something else. And of course, I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, or I've been depressed. I know what I've been there, and you will do anything to get out of that. But we've been told that the solution is pills, and we've forgotten that changing lifestyle or changing something or sitting with the pain for a while, because like your Saturn return is a bit depressing. Depression is a characteristic of the Saturn return. It can be. Some people it's great, you get married and have a dog. Some people it's like you're really off piste, you're quite depressed now, sort your life out.
You need to realign and get back on track.
Yeah, like being in detention by a teacher who's like, look, I see your potential, but going out every Friday and getting pissed is not gonna solve it. And that's that was my experience of it. But I think we're going to get there, and I think that could be what Saturn in Pisces brings, is more these young people who are very sensitive with Saturn in Pisces. If Saturn is who you are deep down, they are artistic, they can see auras, maybe they can't yet, but they have this potential. And a lot of Saturn in Pisces people I know they saw visions and things when they were young. Maybe you did as well. People with a lot of Pisces in their chart often tell me, when I was 7, I used to see fairies, or I used to see spirits. But then I squashed it because it scared me, and then it comes back at their Saturn return.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. I squashed a lot of that intuitive knowing, that slightly psychic energy, because also it was
Weird.
Yeah, and it would freak people out. But it was never something, perhaps because I never really harnessed it, but it was always for just really random, insignificant things. And then also I would have a lot of stuff that I feel like I'm definitely tapping back into, but with dreams. So for me, asking my dreams, the answer to things, and it gives me very, very clear messages. Sometimes not the messages I want.
Yeah.
But I'm learning to kind of reclaim that.
Yeah.
But we mentioned a second ago, you were discussing, you went on to sort of north nodes and south nodes.
Yes.
And I find this quite an interesting topic in terms of, for people listening that are struggling with purpose and kind of direction and having those kind of questions that often come during your Saturn return about like, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? How can they use that, or how do you apply that for people kind of getting a deeper sense of clarity over the direction that they're supposed to be going in, and what aspects they need to kind of enhance or perhaps be wary of?
Yeah. Yes, the South Node. And some people argue that you need to integrate your South Node. And you do, you need to be aware of it. Anyway, so the nodes are points in space where the path of the moon around Earth crosses with the path of Earth around the sun, the ecliptic. So when everything's lined up and you get the eclipses, they're the nodal points. Don't really need to know what they are, but that's what they are, points in space. The North Node is your destiny. It's where you're going to. And you want to cultivate the traits of that. And you want to kind of move away from the traits of your South Node, or be aware of the traps that you fall into when you're triggered, hungry, hormonal, tired, emotionally distressed. And Jan Spiller is my favourite book on the nodes. It's thick, and there's a lot on each of the topics. I read for houses as well, if you know your house. I think the house of the North and South Node are really relevant. But there's information there that is crucial. A lot of us, I've read that astrologers say you could just do a reading of the nodes. You can look at the North Node and get some absolute clarity about what you're supposed to be doing, what your skills, your potential is, and also really, this South Node is a point where you can fall into and go into victim mode and really sit there and wallow in that South Node. And you don't want to. So it's quite nice to know when you're getting trapped into it. And also when you look at that from a relationship astrology perspective as well, that certain people, if their sun sign or they've got planets that sit on your South Node, they're going to like pull you back into that.
Interesting. Because my South Node
Virgo.
is yeah. And then my North Node is Pisces. So essentially that means that Pisces is the direction in which I'm heading.
You need to let go.
Okay.
Yeah, with North Node Pisces, I don't know which house it's in. I didn't look, second or third, probably third, maybe.
I'm not sure.
I'll look in a minute. But with Pisces, you want to be the free-flowing Pisces. It's really important for you to stop micromanaging. With the South Node in Virgo, your bad habit would be like, I can control everything with my anxiety and my herbs.
I know, because I spoke to Nora about it. I was like, but I'm so not a Virgo. She was like, perfectionist, controlling everything. I was like, okay.
50 Brazilian herbs in a nice row.
That, to be fair, is Sydney, who is a Virgo, who's put them into a
she's
nice
keeping
row.
you in the South Node. Nice. Is it Sydney and early Virgo or?
Sid?
August or September?
September.
Okay, so not exact. Because, you're like, I think 1 degree. But you want to integrate that. You do want to integrate your Virgo-ness, for sure.
So how do people integrate the
good bits? You the Virgo...
being
organised, healthy, eating properly, moderation, all of that. But you'd be wary of, with a Virgo South Node, perhaps a past life, they would argue, where you were responsible, where you're a medicine woman and you were responsible for people, and if you gave them too much of the wrong herb, everything would go wrong. So there's this really extreme anxiety about getting things right. That's, and not playing not playing God, not being in control of everything and not micromanaging the universe. Virgo South Node, not Virgo in general, but the South Node energy of Virgo, where the bad habits of that kind of hyper anxiety about getting everything just right. Yeah. And you want to move to that North Node in Pisces, which is quite easy for you because your moon's there as well. And be like, okay, I trust the universe. I'm just a speck in the cosmos, and I'm going to let go and let things happen and let things flow, and I'm going to share. And because you've got a moon North Node together, not that tight, but still they're both there, really about doing feminine things, working with the moon, sharing information.
The other thing that I wanted to discuss with you that we've actually not had anyone come on the podcast and talk about. There are two things. Things. One, numerology.
Okay.
Completely pretty much foreign to me. So, because you said,
Six.
I didn't, yeah, what does, you just looked at me and you said 6. I was like, okay.
Classic.
What do you mean 6?
If I add your date of birth up, it would, and I reduced it all down, would get to 6.
How does that happen?
1 + 5.
Yeah.
1st of May.
Yeah.
And then 1989, I know is a 9 because the 80s are really easy. So 1989, 1 + 9 + 8 + 9, if you add it up, adds up to 27. 2 + 7 is 9.
I'm not great at maths, but
Yeah, I know. Legit. I'm speaking to a Neptunian. They're like,
I'm quite dyslexic.
The
When it comes to maths, I'm like, okay. So what does that actually mean?
What does it mean? So each number, in numerology, you always just reduce down. So you add up the date of birth and keep adding. Like, I got 27 and 2 + 7 is 9. You always just keep adding until you get a digit, unless it's 11 or 22. Because they're master numbers.
Okay.
1 1 2 2. Numerology loves a repeating number. When I got in the Uber to come here, the ETA was 1111.
I know. I did see. I think you messaged it around that time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Again, like so free.
Aww.
Oh, is that lovely?
It's not going to be late, but cool. So yes. So a 1 is a bit like an Aries. If you think about 1, it's a singular energy. It looks singular. It's like bolt upright, gets going. A 2 is quite service orientated, humble, bows down. 3 is the number of joy. 4 is about structure. If you look around you, everything, all the 4s, the walls, the doors, everything. 4s are very structure and organized. 5 is about change. It's half straight and half curvy, and it goes in all different directions, and it's quite random. I met a 5 on Saturday. She was doing a tasting in the health food store. She's like, oh yeah, well I live in Scunthorpe, but then we've got a farm down here, and I work in sales. I was like, and then she's like, what do you do? I was like, you sound like a 5. And she's like, how do you know? And I was like, because you've just got this weird life where you're all over the place. 5s tend to operate like that. 6 is the honeycomb, hexagonal. So as a 6, it's all community and friends and being nice. 6 looks like a pregnant lady. So 6 is all responsible and looking after everyone and putting more effort into your friendships than everyone else, and just very caretaking and community focused and a bit artistic as well. 7 is spiritual number, 7 chakras, 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 days in the week, like God's number. So 7s are they tend to be teachers and researchers and often their own gardeners in nature. They need to be in nature thinking, and they are #spiritual. Bit of a Pisces-ish vibe. Then the 8 is money. A lot of people know that because the Chinese love the number 8. So 8 is money and power, like banking and private members clubs and designer clothes. And then the 9 is humanitarian. So again, like the 6, but upside down, caring for people, quite emotional, quite wise, end of a cycle. And the 11 is a higher vibration of 2, and the 22 is a higher vibration of 4. So what
does that mean?
So the 11 is like the 2. The 2 is very sensitive and caring. The 11 is very sensitive. If you know anyone born on the 11th, my taxi driver was born on the 11th. He's very well thought out, extremely sensitive to their environment. They tend to have a natural psychic ability. Again, very Pisces. The 7 and the 11 have that Neptunian feel.
So people can work that out by adding together basically the day they were born and the month they were born.
And yeah,
and the year. Okay.
DOB. Yeah. Date of birth. And then there's loads to numerology, like with astrology. So your life path number, your main number is what that is, your total. But then there's the day of the month you were born on. So you're born on the 1st. So you have some one energy, independent, do things on your own. Born on the 1st. Yes. It's like fresh energy. And then you can do your name. So every letter has a corresponding number, ABC 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we won't go.
No, we won't go there. God, no.
I do find numerology as a subject quite, perhaps that's just my...
People are scared of numbers.
I'm a little bit scared of numbers.
A lot of people are.
I'm not scared, just,
they're just
maths.
like, numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that I'm, really quite interested in, but know very little about is astrocartography. So for those that don't know, could you explain what astrocartography is?
Yes. So astrocartography is putting your birth chart over the globe, or another way of thinking about it is it's quite a literal manifestation of your birth chart. So when you were born, the sun was somewhere. So you were born just before sunset, I guess.
My dad says I was born at 6:20 p.m.
And so that's, just before sunset in May, probably. Sunset's like, I don't know, 8. But if you wanted to perhaps go to your sun sign, so what we do in astrocartography is put lines over the globe, over the map, and all the different points in your birth chart are transposed onto the map, and what they are depicting is where the sun was at the zenith, at the top of the sky, where it was at the bottom of the sky, where the sun was rising and where the sun was setting. So at any given moment, somewhere, the sun is rising. Like right now, the sun is rising somewhere. And the sun rising is about you coming out into the world, you meeting the world. It's literally on your rising sign. If you're born, and we already spoke about what the rising sign is. So if you have the sun rising, then it adds to a sunny persona to you. It gives you almost a Leo feel, and you are well received, and you're generous, and you're outgoing. So you can go to the part of the world now, and you can go to where the sun was rising when you were born. And the astrocartography map shows you that. And then when you go there, you experience that energy.
Because just to add, because this can
it's
probably feel like
confusing,
quite an overwhelming concept if people aren't familiar with it. But it's basically, when people travel and they have a certain feeling or energy when they go to a place, and it might be that they just feel like they've been there before, 1,000 times before. Or they go and they feel, this is not right for me. But yet they could be traveling with someone that's having completely polar opposite experience. And so astrocartography is so fascinating because it allows you to actually see what place. And I'm going to butcher it because I can't quite remember exactly what it was. But I had someone come on to talk about human design, and we ended up discussing about places, and astrocartography came up. And it was the first time I'd really heard about it. And I was saying how much of a connection I had with Australia and Sydney. And she was like, I bet you have a line that goes through it. And it goes like bang through Sydney. I think it's my MC. But how can, because obviously when they look at it online, and even for myself, it feels like, whoa, this is
a lot.
It's a bit like looking at a chart when you don't know. It's like, what does this all mean? How can people actually, what are they going to be looking out for specifically that they can take away if they are having that kind of desire to travel?
Go. Yeah, I think obviously there's always that caution thing, like don't make massive decisions. Like when I was in my 20s, before I was a proper astrologer, and I'm a Sag, and I like 2 boys. One was a Sag and one was a Virgo. And I was like, well, I need to be with a Sag because that's more compatible than the Virgo. But that was an ignorant thing to do because I have the moon in Taurus, so the Virgo goes very well. So yeah, there's always don't make mad decisions. But I remember first hearing about astrocartography a few months into properly becoming an astrologer, and you just want to get the map and look at it and be like, where are my lines? Because we all have a place, like you have with Sydney and I had with Rome. Like, why? I want to see my lines because there's got to be a line.
Yeah.
So you can go on astro.com and go on astro click travel, and it's really good because you just click on, use the mouse and click, and it gives you a little bit of feedback about this place brings you luck, this place is good for work, but not good for making friends. This place will feel like home, but you won't be that sociable. So you can get an idea. That's the thing. Like, do you want to go and become better at work and be more visible? Maybe your business would be more visible if you were in Sydney or something. But maybe you want to go and live somewhere and feel really at home. You want to go to the moon. Or maybe you want to go and write. A lot of writers, they want to go and tune into their Mercury. But you're always working with your own birth chart. Kieran Devlin, who I studied with, he wrote a great blog on this, and he went to his Venus line. But he has a Venus-Saturn aspect in his birth chart. So he went and sat at a table and everyone else was in couples and he was on his own because his Venus was still being Saturned.
How does that?
Well, if Saturn is about hard work and loss and lack and, feeling lonely or maybe not feeling good enough because Saturn's there being like, you could be more attractive. You could be earning more money. You could be there. Saturn's undermining his natural Venusian attractiveness or at least self-esteem, if Venus also informs your self-esteem. So when you go to that Venus line, if your personal Venus is challenged in your birth chart, then you're going to meet that challenge literally in the world.
Wow. Okay. And on that subject, because we actually haven't really explored it that much.
Oh yeah, we haven't.
Of Venus, love, and how, what people should look out for and kind of how, Venus manifests in the chart.
Venus is a favourite topic of mine, particularly at the minute, and with all the relationship stuff. I think because, like I already told you at the very beginning, it was my boyfriends and it was my relationships that really made me want to, like a lot of people, get into astrology and understand it. And Venus tells us so much about self-esteem and what we're attracted to and how we value ourselves. And when it comes to compatibility, it is a major consideration.
How come?
Because she's what you love. And so you will be dating your Venus and meeting your Venus and attracting your Venus a lot. It's the whole chart. It is your 7th house and your sun and your moon. But there is something to her. And also what's really interesting, I think it's been a bit of a discourse for women on Instagram and maybe men. But over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of self-esteem, loads of money chat, hasn't there? All these money courses and learning and that's all Venus. That's
really?
Yeah.
Why is that Venus?
Because Venus is how we value ourselves.
Okay.
And she's our currency. She's our talent. She is part of it. Nothing in the birth chart is like chopped up and held in isolation. But still, there is something to Venus that you want to really nurture your particular Venus sign and aspects in house, because if you feel good about yourself, then you charge what you're worth and you don't waste time in relationships that are clearly going nowhere. That's all about your Venus.
So it's more about the self than it is love in a way.
Well, it's the mirror. If the Venus symbol is the mirror, you know, and it's the hand mirror, and it's ruler of Libra and ruler of Taurus, and there's a lot of I'm attracted to you because you remind me of me. That, and also if you can't be in a healthy relationship with someone else unless you've got a healthy relationship with yourself, and that is very evident in how you look after yourself and all the rest of it. So really broad and interesting discourse, as is the other side of Venus, which is envy and jealousy, because Venus was very jealous mother-in-law in myth. If you look at the myth of Venus Aphrodite, she was like top babe, liked being top dog, did not like a threat to her status at the top. And that's also a really interesting part of female dynamics, relationship dynamics. What Liz Green wrote a lot on, or at least what I've read, is that very real envy within families where the young daughter is attractive and the mother's feeling displaced, and it's always been there, and it's natural, and it's not
that must be something people would feel a lot of shame around.
Exactly. And it's not mutually exclusive with love. But there is envy within families. Envy between siblings, but also mother. And it's all Freudian, Oedipal, Electra. You can go right in there if you want. And it's natural. And I think we are competitive. Again, reading about nature, we are competitive. But we're supposed to be civilized. And denying that competition might be unhealthy as well, because there's been a lot of undermining of that very natural feeling. I think with anything, like when you feel angry, what, do you deny the anger, or do you go, okay, no, I understand why I feel like this. Okay, I'm going to move that along. And with envy, it's not necessarily if you feel envious of someone, an idea that, okay, that means that you want to be like them. It can just be like, that looks really nice. I would like to have that. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's for you. I think it's quite corrosive as well, this idea that, oh, if you're triggered by that, that means that you want it, go and have it. It's like, no, we're all unique. What we want is to shine in our own way. Yeah. And to empower people to do that. And not because of a lot of marketing, a lot of the way we are held, or the way society is shaped, isn't it? Like, you got to, at the minute, like, do your lips and do your eyebrows, and we are sold to that this is an ideal, and and
it's kind of a one thing, that we're kind of told that is the ideal of beauty, but it creates this kind of clone-like thing.
Yeah, it's really, when you think about it, trends are always there because the planets are always doing trends for us. Like Saturn will move into Pisces and we'll have a new trend. But it's like, can you own your unique bit? Can you own your own Venus and not get sucked into the trends? I think.
How do people do that?
Well, it's being true to yourself and know what your Venus wants. If your Venus is in Virgo,
mine's in Taurus.
So in Taurus, she wants all the nice stuff, the nice luxury, like 20 million things in the bathroom.
It's like a pharmacy.
That was a good Taurus bathroom.
To be fair, my bathroom is a serious Taurus bathroom. Like
plants.
When I saw it, I was like, I'm home. This is it.
Big window, trees, and now you've got 50,000 products, which is classic Venus in Taurus. It's the the eye mask, the chocolates, the champagne. It's luxe. Venus rules Taurus, so she's like face masked, manicured to the max. Like, that's what she wants. Venus in Virgo, it values health and order and being organized and different things. Mm-hmm. And she's simpler, perhaps. Mm-hmm. They're both are natural, but a Venus in Gemini wants variety and communication, and she wants to be able to show how intelligent she is and how multifaceted she is, and she can travel and pick up the language really quick and chat to everyone, and that makes her feel good. So it's about what does your Venus want, and give her what she wants. My Venus in Capricorn, I love working.
Interesting. Okay. And I think that's really useful for people as a takeaway, and how can they kind of use it or be aware of it in matters of the heart when they are going into relationship? What are the kind of things to, as an individual, to look out for, or to be aware that they might need more of or less of?
Yeah, like so Venus in Capricorn, it's shy, because Capricorn is shy, emotionally reticent, and being aware of that, for instance, for me was really helpful, because I feel that if I've said how I feel once, that was a big deal and it's done. But actually, it's important to continue to communicate, and I have to push that natural tendency to be like, to back away, because that's my natural, being aware of your natural tendencies, being aware of what you want, but also where you can be a bit like over the top. And and it's what you need. Venus in Virgo, like my sis, is organized and clean, and she likes a plan, and she needs to know that she's, it's not Pisces. She needs to know that she's leaving at this time and coming back. And when she was little, if she wasn't fed by 6, like it was past the routine, she just wouldn't eat, because the Venus in Virgo needed the routine, because Virgo needs routines, and it's fundamental to who we are. Mm-hmm. And in partnership, you're going to be looking to have that need met, but that's also your moon and all the stuff. But but if Venus does inform what we're attracted to,
that is interesting,
and what we attract,
right.
it's the two-way
street. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Saturn Returns podcast. This has given me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure it has for our listeners too. And is there any kind of one final thing of advice, I guess particularly perhaps I would say for those that are about to go through their Saturn return?
Look for the synchronicities. I think the universe is actually quite kind, at the Saturn return. For me, there was a lot going wrong, so to speak, but strangers that I met on the train or the plane, or a guy in the office who just gave me a book. I think you need this book. The universe is really waking up. You're really waking up into a whole new phase, particularly those that are in Pisces, and it's happening for us all collectively. To look for the subtle magic in the conversations, because it's supportive. Even when you're going through transition and you feel empty and lost, that you are on a journey, and embrace it.
I call them spirit guides. Yeah. I remember actually when I was going through my Saturn return it was once I had like a huge fight with my boyfriend at the time, which was a relationship that I just was not supposed to be in. And he let me out the car, put me out the car, and I was on like a bench crying. And this pregnant woman, and everyone was just walking past me, and this pregnant woman came over and just sat with me and just basically told me to leave my boyfriend. And it was just one of those things that it was just a very kind act from a stranger. I didn't listen to her immediately, but she was right.
Yeah.
And I always think that we can get very heady, you know, we can get very stuck in the pain of like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like push, figure it out without actually noticing the synchronicities or the people, that just appear in our life. So I think that's a beautiful thing to leave people with. So thank you.
Yeah, and sitting with the pain is also because we're kind of trained to run from the pain a bit, aren't we? But it's actually like you're experiencing life, and it's beautiful.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and this conversation between me and Francesca. I found it super useful and really interesting. Like I said in the conversation, whenever I meet astrologers, it's always this case of them remembering something rather than learning it. It's like it's a language that's coming back to them, and that very much comes across with Francesca. What my kind of thoughts and feelings were after this episode was like to lean into your intuitive knowing, your sort of psychic abilities, and all this stuff around Neptune that I found. So if you're my age, if you're 33, about to be 34, you probably have a lot of Neptune as well. And that can be in that sort of watery, dreamlike space that can be a really powerful and beautiful thing, but it also probably meant that your Saturn return was like a double whammy, like mine was. Explains a lot. Anyway, if you guys want to hear more from Francesca, you can find her at Francesca Oddie Astrology on Instagram. And thank you so much for listening as always, and remember, you are not alone. Goodbye.